Hello and welcome to Thursday's Hotline Live with Record Sport. My name is Daniel Caw, and tonight I'm joined by Hoddit and Doddit, Keith Jackson and Scott McDermott. And before you slag that, Keith, that suggestion came from our good friend Kyle Gunn.
I know who it came from, and I'm more than happy to accept the title, which has been given to us by our good friend Kyle.
Aye, thanks for that, Kyle. I appreciate it.
And Kyle, I'll see you later, wee man.
I'll be able to watch with him later
on. How you both doing? Good?
Aye, all right. Not bad.
Good,
not bad.
Not as enthusiastic as you, Daniel, but I'm all right.
Listen, it's my favourite time of the day, entertaining the masses. Where should we start? We tend to start.
Where should we start? We should usually start in the studio, Daniel, but I see once again I'm the only one that's bothered to come in.
Keith, you're breaking up.
Yeah, carry on.
Danny Rohl is the name on everyone's lips this afternoon. Been linked to Rangers, Scott. I mean, 36 years old, Sheffield Wednesday manager, or I think outgoing Sheffield Wednesday manager.
Yep.
He's now one of the favourites for the bookies, and they're really wrong. What do you make of it?
I wouldn't read too much into the bookies odds, to be fair. Listen, it's a new name. It's he is kind of seen as one of the kind of bright, up and coming coaches down in England.
Why? Because he finished 12th in the championship.
He was talked about even when he was at Southampton. I think he was there as Ralph Hasenhüttl's assistant.
Getting relegated.
Aye. He's
sounds like a good choice.
He's had a few bad moments as well. But you're saying that, Keith, and you're right. But it wouldn't surprise me if it is a name like that. That the new owners might go for. If they decide to go down that route. A foreign coach, young foreign coach. No previous links to Rangers. He's worked at Red Bull. Obviously, there's that link there as well, so they probably know all about him. He's obviously come up against Leeds for a couple of seasons now as well, so they will know of him. That's it. I spoke to somebody at Sheffield Wednesday today about him, and it's not been confirmed yet, obviously, that he's definitely going, but it seems...
Yeah, but he has told the media back in Germany that he's basically out.
Yeah, but we're led to believe there's a hefty compensation fee to go and get him. Not sure exactly how much. I know 5 million's been mentioned. I'm not sure if it's as much as that, but there is a compensation fee to go and get him. And if he's coming out and been pretty blatant, saying that he's going, that suggests to me that he knows somebody's going to come in and pay it. Something's far down the line already. In terms of being a fit for Rangers, do I think it would be right? No. I think for a young guy like that, having no experience of Scottish football or Rangers, to come up here into a new ownership and all the hype that's going to be surrounding that, to try and go in against Brendan Rodgers in your first season, try to win a title, my gut feeling is that it would just be too big an ask, and I think Rangers should probably go down a different route. The guy I spoke to today about him, he kind of was trying to describe him. There's a few things. One, tactically brilliant, which is obviously a positive. Very hungry for success in terms of his own career, which is another positive. The third one he says was he's an emotional guy, and that kind of worried me slightly. Because I think when you come up here, you almost need to kind of take the emotion out of it. I think if you get caught up in the whole old firm goldfish bowl that we talk about constantly, then it can quickly swallow you up. So, listen, I think he'll be Rangers manager. No, I don't. I think he'll probably go elsewhere this summer. But it's an interesting one, at least.
He certainly, I tell you what, he doesn't lack confidence in himself. Just looking at some of the quotes, I think he's credited himself with winning the Champions League at Bayern Munich, even though he was not really the manager. And he has said that this feels like the time for him to either, I think his first target, he said, was returning to the Bundesliga because that's where he wants to manage. He said that he would be, you know, if not the Bundesliga, then the English Premier League would be a good place to go. And failing either of them, if he could go and manage a club in the Champions League, he would accept that as well. I'm slightly taken aback by some of the stuff. Yeah, I've only been a manager for 2 minutes, but I have been in football for 16 years. 16 years? I had a pair of socks that were in football for more than 16 years. This one feels... By the way, I won't rule it out because it's Rangers and anything is possible. They have had a history of making strange decisions. This one would be up there with the strangest, most left field, hard to understand decisions of the lot. You know, well, okay, it's Rangers. It's up there with some bad decisions that have been made.
There's plenty of competition.
A 36-year-old guy with, you know, really limited experience, especially of being a manager, to be confronted with what's going to be and no experience whatsoever of understanding what Glasgow's like, what the club is like, what the environment's like. I would be... listen, it may happen, and if it does, then you can all come back and have a laugh at us. But I would be staggered if this happened, and I would be even more incredulous if someone like that was to be able to come in and make a success of the kind of task that's facing Rangers this summer. So, but yeah, look, somebody's put a fiver on them at the bookies, so the odds come tumbling down, and that's why we're left to have this discussion. To me, it makes no sense at all.
You mentioned the bookies. There's the odds there. Sorry, go on, Scott.
I was just going to say it was you that put the fiver on, probably.
Give us a talking point for the top of the show.
Do you know, it wasn't. That's a good idea. I'll remember that the next time we've got a quiet day.
Bit of fiver with Scotty McDermott next week.
We've got plenty of comments coming in on this already. Let me throw a few at you. Hoopsaholic says the saga makes the conclave look like a thrill ride. Will the Union Ewoks send up a blue pyro when a manager is finally announced? John says the key with the next coach is how well they understand Scottish football, as well as having real managerial skills. Clermont lack the former, Barry lacks the latter. They'll need both. This one, Craig says, yet to hear a single name who would compete with Brendan Rodgers. And Grant says, I'd be worried about the same thing that Clermont and Le Guen both failed with. The failure to grasp the magnitude of the expectations here.
It's a very important point. Listen, there are some jobs, there are some environments, and I think, you know, Glasgow on either side of the divide comes into that category where, and for me, I was always concerned that Philip Clermont would struggle to adjust, and that was proven to be the case. That's quite an experienced guy. That's a guy that's won titles. He's been around football for a long time. He played in England. So he's a well-travelled, well-experienced manager, a good CV. I had a look right at the start and I thought, I'm just not sure that this movie's for you. It takes a certain breed to be able to understand and adapt to the demands, the strains, the pressures, the intensity of life in football in Glasgow. And, you know, you can have all the best ideas from the coaching textbooks and you could have come through all the best classrooms. You've not got a clue until you're pitched into this place what it really entails. And that would be my fear for somebody of you know, basically no experience. And a guy that's, you know, has no idea about what this particular city feels like, what this particular rivalry feels like. And again, it's one of the comments there's totally correct. You're going in against one of the elite managers in British football. A guy that's just about to clean up 5 out of his first 6 trophies in his second stint, having taken 7 out of 7 in his first. I don't think that's a thing that you want to throw some guy that's got no feeling for it straight into. I mean, you're basically throwing him into a fire.
Jack, I totally agree with everything that you're saying, and you're right about Clermont. And the worry there is that Clermont, when you think back to the appointment of Clermont, he was about the best, probably the best that they could get. In terms of winning trophies, experience. He's managed the Champions League, won titles. People were crying out for. He's got to be a guy that knows about winning. He's got to be a winner. Clermont ticked a lot of those boxes, and yet comes to Glasgow and just can't do it for a variety of reasons. Doesn't get it. Puts his foot in it at times with comments and decisions, and just didn't get it. So you're thinking, well, so where do they go now? Do you know what I mean? I mean, you're right. Rodgers is an elite manager. I said this a couple of weeks ago. I says to you, Daniel, the column I wrote when the Americans are trying to pick a coach. The coach they should be talking about is Brendan Rodgers, because that's who the new guy is going to need to live with. That's who the new guy is going to need to deal with. And that's not just on the pitch. That includes dealing with everything off the pitch. Media. He has to have the personality to cope with that and compete with Rodgers on that level. It is so difficult to go and get the right guy. So do you go and get Sean Dyche? Sean Dyche has managed in British football. He'll have managed against Rodgers. He'll know how big Rangers are, even though he's not been in Scottish football. He knows Rodgers. He knows guys like Malcolm Mackay. He'll be aware of the environment up here. But then the slight against him would be, has he really won that much? He spent most of his career at the bottom of the league. Do you know what I mean? Fighting against relegation, whether it be Burnley or Everton. I know you get Burnley up to 7th in Europe, but it's a different kettle of fish up here. So I agree with everything Keith says, but I just think all of that makes it so difficult. You throw Rodgers into the mix, you throw the fact that it's a new regime, Rangers are chasing, the fans will want instant success. It is a massive, massive appointment, and as we touched on, certainly no one that you think would be suited to a 36-year-old German guy with limited experience.
Look, Scott, there's something that kind of holds firm on this. This is Glasgow. It should come with a health warning. It will make your head explode if you don't know what to expect. You will be frazzled in this environment, and we've seen it on a number of different occasions with a number of different personalities, and they all come here and they all sound confident enough and they all believe in themselves. But until they're pitched into the coalface, they've actually got no idea what it is they're confronting. And you can see it visibly shocking them. They walk in, they have a swagger, they'll tell you how good they are, they'll tell you about their plans. And as it starts to unravel game by game, week by week, so do they. They unravel as people. And you can't have that as a leader, not at a club. And that's where Brendan Rodgers, he's calm, he's composed, he's measured, he's experienced. He's the guy that when Celtic were going through difficult periods, and they did go through a really difficult period in his first season back, and if you remember, he actually wobbled a little bit, and he didn't handle it that impressively. And that's a guy with this kind of vast sort of career experience behind him. And he wobbled a little bit. Even he wobbled a little bit in that first season. I think it was when Celtic dropped points at Motherwell. There was a period of time where Clermont had come in and had actually started pretty well. Brendan Rodgers didn't cope particularly well, and that's a guy as cool, composed, calm, experienced as he is. So, and also on top of that, a guy that was here second time around, a guy that knew the environment. It wouldn't have come as a shock to him, and yet you could still feel it startled him a little bit. And
his experience at that point, if you
got
remember,
him through it.
His experience told him at that point something had to. He had to change the narrative. He almost had to cause kind of ructions. Something had to change. Whether it was in his own dressing room, whether it was through the media. Remember, it was around about that time that separate media conferences with Brendan Rodgers was stopped. You remember he had a wee go at one of the female reporters at the time for quizzing him. He did wobble a wee bit, but I think his experience of being there and knowing the environment and the landscape, something had to change. And he said a couple of things that Philippe Clement bit on right away when he shouldn't have. and all of a sudden Rangers start capitulating and Celtic start motoring again. And that was a big turning point in the title race.
And I think when things get tight, Scott, in a season, in a title race, when it's two teams going toe to toe, see if your manager can remain composed, in charge, and you look at him and think, no, this guy's leading us. We've got faith in where this guy wants to take us and what he's asking us to do. That's such a big part of it. And I've looked at a number of guys that have walked into the Rangers job over the years, and I've just thought, when things get to the kind of squeaky bum time, if you were in that dressing room, would you look at him and think, he's got this, don't worry, lads? And, maybe Steven Gerrard, I think he would have given off that vibe. And I think they need somebody like that. Doesn't need to be the most vastly experienced manager in the world, but needs to look like a guy who's been there, seen it, done it, won it. A guy that you can look at and have real faith that when the pressure's on, he'll make good decisions, the right decisions. And that's a bit that you can't factor in. You can look like a great manager on a computer or in a classroom, but until you're confronted by these high pressure situations, high intensity, and as I said, I keep saying it, this unique environment in Glasgow and this rivalry between the two clubs, until you've experienced that and learnt from it, it will slap you about the face. As I said, your head will explode if you're not prepared for it.
Aye. We've got plenty of great comments coming in. Keep them coming if you want to get involved in the conversation. Let me run through a few more of them just now. Your loyal Muppet says, why get someone not experienced only to replace them again after bad results? We need Mourinho or Dyche. Marzuno raises what I think is a good point. I don't know how you could entice a Rodgers level manager to Scotland. He wouldn't be at Celtic if he wasn't born a fan. I think fair point.
It's a very fair point. And by the way, it flies in the face of you brought up now. I think, Scott, you were on the show a couple of nights ago and there was some story came from somewhere, I know not where, saying that, one of the prerequisites for the next Rangers manager is he's a guy that should have no experience of being at the club before, which strikes me as one of the weirdest things I've ever heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I said to Daniel at the time, there's been a few anomalies like Postecoglou, for instance, but in my lifetime, all the most successful managers at Rangers and Celtic have all had a connection to the club. Have all been a fan of the club, whether that be Walter Smith, Alec McLeish, Brendan Rodgers, Neil Lennon, Martin O'Neill. All of these guys were all linked to the club. So I don't get this argument of when I hear fans they need to get away from the whole kind of manager that's a fan or manager that's linked to the club. All the most successful firm managers, most of them, have all had a link to the club.
Well, you could go Postecoglou,
an Advocat, but
Dick Advocat, Wim Jansen would be three.
So much to spend, Jack.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. You're right.
Millions.
It wasn't a fair fight. Yeah.
No.
So no, for me, having it's actually an advantage if you find a candidate that is really familiar with the environment and really familiar with the intensity that's going to be placed upon him and the demands. That's got to be a plus rather than a negative. And that's what I'm saying. I don't understand why you would say, well, that's not what we want.
No.
We'll take anybody but that.
That's where Celtic are so lucky, though, that the guy's right there. Rodgers ticks both of those boxes. He's an elite level manager, should be Premier League manager or top 5 leagues in Europe, but he just happens to be born a Celtic fan and have a real emotional
pull. Yeah.
And both times Celtic have went to get him have been a good time in his career for him to go to Celtic. So a lot of things have aligned for Brendan Rodgers to be at Celtic, and that's why they've been fortunate in that sense.
Our pal, friend of the show, Gianni, who was blocked the other night, but he's back for now. He says, I think regardless of who it is next season is written off for me. But more importantly, he says, a lot of people mocked Daniel this week, which is very uncalled for, but he deserves a lot of credit for tipping Inter for the Champions League. Well said, Gianni. Well said. We'll come to the Champions League a little bit later on. Sorry, Keith.
Why is that well said? Why is that well said?
He's giving me credit for tipping Inter.
Nobody's giving me credit. Nobody's giving me credit for tipping PSG.
You tipped
who will
Arsenal
win it.
last night.
Are you getting listen, Daniel, I know you went down the awards and you won a first prize, right? But basically that was built on the work that everybody else has done here. I'm telling you, right? PSG win this hands down.
Interesting. Well, we'll see. We'll see. I'll be in with Manter Top next week.
Are you going to go and lift the trophy for them as well, aye? We John Terry. John Terry's got a move to the San Siro.
Listen, John Terry was out that night. I'm part of the starting 11, right?
He'll come in with Stokes, these shin guards and all that.
That's it. Screw-ons and all that.
This is outrageous. Back to the football, because this is absolutely ridiculous. Elsewhere, Hearts are reportedly closing in on a new manager. I know social media is not the be-all and end-all, but a lot of kind of growing comments on a few influential Hearts sites seem to be suggesting that Derek McInnes is on his way to Tynecastle. I know we talked about it the other night, Scott, didn't we? But,
yep.
I mean, with Kilmarnock playing Hearts on the final day of the season, it could be a very, very interesting appointment.
Could be, but I think it'd be the right appointment, Daniel, which is the most important thing. We said a few nights ago, I mean, Hearts, the last time, seemed to get the supercomputer to pick their manager, and we know how that worked out. With Neil Critchley, I think it's been reported pretty much since he left that Hearts were going to go down a different route, and just like I said with the Rangers thing, they seem to want someone with real experience of Scottish football, and there's no better candidate than Derek McInnes. I mean, guys like John McGlynn, Stephen Robinson, that would have come into the thinking as well, I'm sure. But if they can go and get McInnes for Kilmarnock, I think for Hearts it'd be a brilliant appointment. Good move for Derek as well. Going to a massive club again, it'll feel similar, obviously, when he was at Aberdeen, and you look at the success that they had in terms of keeping Aberdeen pretty much in that top three, winning a trophy. I think if that gets done, then it'd be a brilliant appointment for Hearts, no doubt.
What do you make of it, Keith?
Well, as I said previously, Jackotown Analytics did identify Derek McInnes as the perfect man for the job before the computer came up with Neil Critchley. So they could have saved themselves quite a lot of trouble if they'd just listened the first time now. Of course, I think Derek McInnes is the man for the job. It's no secret how highly I rate him as a manager. I think he's had a difficult season at Kilmarnock this year, if truth be told, and I think he'll be desperately disappointed with how the table's looking right now. But that doesn't take away the back catalogue of work that he's achieved in Scotland. And if that's what Hearts are looking for, a guy that knows how to go the course and distance, that can cope with the pressure that comes with expecting to be the best of the rest, and try and get to Hampden, get to semi-finals, finals, and to build a squad. Because one of the things that should count so heavily in Derek McInnes' favour is over that period at Aberdeen, how many squads did he actually have to rebuild and shape and start again? And every time he would lose some of his best players, he was able to adjust, he was able to work the transfer market to bring people. That's exactly the kind of guy that Hearts should be looking for, because you don't want a flash in the pan. Hearts should be regularly up there fighting for third place at least every season. And in Derek McInnes, you've got the one guy in the league that's proven that he can do that over a period of time. So does that mean that Hearts are going to do the right thing? Again, I'm not sure, Scott. Just having the discussion about the Rangers, man, you just don't know these days that somebody's going to come up with some left field idea, try and reinvent the wheel. Maybe somebody will get it right and it'll be an incredible thing and we can all sit back and applaud. For me, you try to minimise the risk when you're making these appointments. And, Derek McInnes would represent minimal risk. Minimal risk would be used as a phrase for anybody that tried to pick up the phone to Billy Bowie right now and suggest to him that this is something that he might want to sign off on. That might be difficult. That said, Kilmarnock are almost safe. What's interesting and this is, what I'm being told, and I believe this to be the case, is that I do think that Hearts have planned a board meeting for this weekend. And that's a little bit of a Hotline Live exclusive. I'm told that part of the reason for, why it's this weekend is that Anne Budge has been on holiday, which isn't a great look, really. And there's been some important things to take care of. But she's back. So if that's correct, and the board meeting is basically a conclave to determine who the next, what the next move is, and if these rumours that are gathering pace around Edinburgh are correct, which is that Hearts want to have the new guy in for the last 2 games, then it'll be really interesting. And if it is Derek McInnes, then good luck with the phone call to Billy Bowie, as you said. And then, if you're Derek McInnes, wow, take that job on, and then your second game in charge of going back to Rugby Park, that'll be interesting. But it makes sense in so many levels that it's probably unlikely to happen.
AJSC Tech says, computer says Neil Critchley. I say going to buy a new computer. Mark Fairfield says...
Switch it on and switch it on. Off again.
Marzuno says, no brainer. McInnes must have been scratching his head when Ferguson was appointed to Rangers. What's both your guys' gut feeling? Do you think this is something that will happen? If not before the end of the season, maybe in the summer?
This is what you cannot predict it, because it will come down to who's in charge of making this decision. Do they want to try to appear, as if they've worked something out that nobody else has worked out, or do they want to go and do the obvious thing? Sometimes in football, especially recently, there's been this temptation to avoid doing the obvious thing because, we have to look as if we're smarter than that. If they want to do the obvious and the right thing, then they pick up the phone, they have the conversation with Kilmarnock, and they see if they can do a deal. So it's basically it's an impossible question to answer, Daniel. And
answer it anyway.
No, I can't, because this is the club that gave you Neil Critchley.
That's
would
true.
anybody have put their hand up to that one?
Aye.
And I'd like to go walk into the boardroom right now and ask people to put their hand up that thought it was a good idea right now. The people would be diving under the table. So look, if they want to do the sensible thing, the thing that was probably work out to be in their best interest, you make the call, you see if you can get a deal done, you get Derek McInnes. And if not, you go back to the computer. Maybe the computer said no to Derek McInnes. Might have done, probably did the last time.
Sometimes, Jacko's right, sometimes the answer's staring you in the face. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, you're just mad to ignore it. And
almost feels too obvious, if you know what I mean. It's so obvious.
And that's the problem, Daniel. That's why they went down this other route last time round. And look where it's got them.
Yeah.
Aye. Fair point. Scott, do you think it will happen?
My gut feeling is it probably will. Aye. I mean, there's been... I think there's never kind of no smoke without fire. So it seems to be that he's top of the list or high up in the list. It would be a good move for him. Jacko's right. Might be difficult initially to get him out of Kilmarnock, but I think it's a move Derek McInnes would want if it's on the cards. And I think after going with Critchley, and you could argue the last 2 appointments, Stephen Naismith obviously got the job when he was really inexperienced, did well initially, and then it kind of went pear-shaped and they had to change at that point as well. So it's an obvious thing to say, but they really do need to get this one right. And as Jacko says, that the kind of the low risk factor with McInnes is clear. So why not? No, why not go and do what you think is the right thing? I think ultimately we'll get it. Whether it's before the end of the season, I'm not sure, but I think he probably will end up there.
The thing is, Scott, we were just talking there about Brendan Rodgers and his experience, and when there was a difficult situation, not a disastrous situation, but a difficult one, a testing period in that first season at Celtic, he'd experience, even though he did wobble a little bit, he'd experience to come through, to think it out, to stay calm in a crisis. And I think that what you've seen over the last couple of weeks with Kilmarnock getting themselves into a dreadful position in the league, bottom 6, potentially getting dragged into the relegation issue. Who stayed calm? When you look at the managers in that bottom 6, who, when the heat was really on, actually found a way through. I mean, Kilmarnock aren't safe yet. So it's interesting, again, timing-wise, I think Hearts and Kilmarnock can both take any doubt away this weekend if the results go their way. And so at that point, you've got 2 games left for each and there's nothing on them. So maybe that might facilitate a conversation, make it a little bit easier to get a deal done if it is Derek McInnes that's the preferred candidate.
I think in terms of Kelly's season, I think, no, I'm not trying to totally defend Derek McInnes. It has been a poor campaign, but there's been mitigating circumstances.
Yeah, of course, because he took them into Europe.
Exactly. I mean, you can't underestimate the impact European football had. Injuries to big players like Stuart Finlay, Kyle Vassell, just to name 2. Difficult contract situation with Danny Armstrong. Ends up he's no signed a deal. Might he end up at Hearts at some point if McInnes goes there? The glut of suspensions they had at the start of the season with red cards was
playing with 10 men every Saturday.
Unheard of. So there has been kind of mitigating factors. I think ultimately you know what you're getting with Derek McInnes pretty much. You put him into a big club like Hearts. Talk about investment coming in for Tony Bloom. Should be a bit of money to spend. If he does go in this summer, of course there won't be any Europe, which probably hindered Stephen Naismith. Not so much Neil Critchley, but certainly at the start of the season, he wouldn't have that to worry about. He'd have a full pre-season with him. To try and go and sort the squad out and try and kind of hit the ground running at the start of the Premiership campaign. So, as I say, it ticks a lot of boxes for me.
Dennis Mirren writes in saying, McInnes is crap. Nielsen was the best manager at Hearts. Why not go for him? Interesting shout. This one as well, if I can find it. Alfie Barnes says, wouldn't it be funny if McInnes was appointed just in time to relegate Kelly on the final day? That would be peak Scottish football, wouldn't it?
And I think for that very reason, it'd be unlikely that Billy Bow would even entertain answering the phone if Kilmarnock's situation was still not determined. So maybe after the next round of fixtures, the picture looks a bit clearer. But the potential, and that's what we discussed previously, that if Derek McInnes was a target on the night that they sacked Neil Critchley, how difficult would that have been? I said on our first show after that, Daniel, that I think Derek McInnes would be an obvious front runner for the job. But how do you go about when Hearts at that point, having lost the first game after the post-split, or the first post-split fixture at home to Dundee, how do you go about enabling that to happen? When Kilmarnock are in, and there was that potential that the two of them play against each other, and that if you'd got Derek McInnes at that point, he might actually be in a position where he has to relegate Kilmarnock or try to push them closer towards relegation in the last game of the season. That one to me made it feel almost impossible. But if results go the right way this weekend, then, as I said, both clubs are safe and it becomes a lot easier to have the conversation.
Before we start rounding up, guys, Brendan Rodgers did an exclusive interview with Celtic TV earlier today, Keith. He's obviously preparing for a showdown with Aberdeen, which could see him capture yet another treble. It would be Celtic's 6th in 9 years. And every time I say that, it's pretty remarkable. It's mad.
Yeah. And do you know what? There's a kind of consistency once again, because this is a guy that knows what he's doing, knows how to handle these situations. There's a consistency in the messaging that's coming out from Celtic's manager. And that is, and he's quite right to do it, and I know exactly why he's doing it. He's putting forward this thing, which is, guys, you have to realise that this isn't normal. This is not normal for a club to be winning clean sweep after clean sweep after clean sweep. This is just extraordinary times, unprecedented times in Scottish football, the level of dominance that Celtic have just now. It's astonishing. And the reason that it's really important that he drums that message home, even though it'll probably be lost on most, the bottom line is Brendan will know by now that by the time he starts next season, there'll be this ridiculous set of circumstances around Celtic, which have been there since he came back. Failure to win a treble will somehow be deemed as, a disappointing season. It's a ridiculous set of circumstances. And as I keep saying myself, you take everyone in isolation, because These are extraordinary achievements. A treble in itself, one, is an extraordinary achievement and should be celebrated. And it shouldn't get to the stage, even though it's Celtic's own fault because they keep winning stuff, but it should never be regarded as, oh, well, if we don't win a treble, it's been rubbish. That's just a kind of surreal existence. It can't go on. But I do believe, and I've said already, that Celtic are so much stronger than the rest. Brendan Rodgers is so on top of his game in the position right now, and you know the Rangers have got so much to do and so little time to do it. I don't think they are going to be real credible challengers for the title next season. So I'm putting Celtic firmly as favourites to win another title, which would take it to 5 in a row. And you would probably have to say, yes, okay, later in the season, maybe Rangers get some traction, momentum, they sort themselves out. They're going to be coming at it from a difficult position because they've left it so late. But I would actually probably say at this point, I think I said previously, if you were looking at it, your money would be in Celtic winning another treble next season. But that doesn't mean that failure to do so would be some sort of blemish against Brendan Rodgers or Celtic. Of course it wouldn't. That's just ridiculous.
It's mad. Growing up watching Scottish football, I mean, a treble felt unique. It felt like something out of the ordinary to get
some incredible milestone.
To go and get a treble. I mean, it felt so difficult to do. I mean, I remember Rangers going for a treble, I think it was 94, and it was like so big, and getting into that final, the Scottish Cup final against Dundee United, and they still couldn't go over the line, couldn't get the treble done. I know they went on to they did win trebles under Walter Smith and then Alec McLeish, but very difficult thing to do. And just Jacko's talking about the level of dominance there at Celtic. When I was at Tannadice a couple of weeks ago, Celtic won the title. Obviously, you're sitting in the press box and there's loads of numbers flying about. It's 4 in a row and it's 102 goals and Callum McGregor's 24th trophy or whatever it was, James Forrest 26. But just as I was writing all this stuff, it kind of dawned on me thinking, no, I'm writing about this 4 in a row. If Steven Gerrard hadn't won that title in 2021 for Rangers,
14 in a row.
14 in a row. I'd have been sitting writing about 14 in a row. I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, how could you? What would you write? I mean, it would just become such the norm. I mean, 4 in a row, you can just get by, in terms of, you're almost kind of writing a lot of the same stuff year after year, but 14 in a row, it could have been staggering. Absolutely staggering.
Jimbo in the comments, Keith says, it's hardly a surprise when a 2-horse race was turned into a 1-horse race that more trebles were won.
It's still in a chat. I don't care, and yes, I get that. But you can look at every league around the world, and at any one time, there's probably maximum 3 teams with a real chance of winning the title. So to continually manage to achieve that, but then scoop up every other prize that's going. No, I'm sorry. You can diminish it as much as you want. You can try and normalise it, as Brendan Rodgers has been saying. This isn't normal. It's a world away from normal. We've never been so far removed from a normal set of circumstances in Scottish football. And that has to be, yes, people will argue, well, kind of Rangers have shot themselves, but that's Rangers' fault. You've got to give credit where it's due for the fact that Celtic have been so relentless and they've created this culture. And it's a culture within the club of people who live and breathe it, who, are just... And when new players come into it, they plug straight into it. They get it. This is a winning machine. And that's something that you can't build overnight. That's what I've talked about with Americans. They'll have loads of good intentions and all that. But the thing is, Celtic have got like a 20-year jump on them now in terms of what they've built, the mentality that's been built and fostered inside the 4 walls of Lennoxtown. Puts them miles in front. And they deserve all the credit in the world for managing to achieve that.
Just before we move on from Celtic, Singing the Blues says, what's the record for titles in a row? I think Rosenborg got 13, but not sure. I think that is. That rings a bell. Kaiser says, we will do 9 in a row for the 3rd time. We'll be garnished with trebles, maybe even break the 10 before Rangers recover. You mentioned on the show, Keith, last week, I think, that Brendan Rodgers will look, if he does get to 5 in a row, he's then kind of looking ahead at that.
I'm sure he's
potential
already got one eye on it. I'm sure he's
well, brings me to my next point. This time next year he's out of contract. You'd have thought at some point this summer, Peter Lawwell and the board will need to sit down with him and go, look, are you staying beyond that? Do you think he will?
I think they'll be fairly relaxed about it. I think that Brendan Rodgers will, the discussion we had last night about what does Celtic's transfer policy look like this summer, that might feed into it and dictate what Brendan Rodgers thinks once he's got to the end of this contract. If he's getting all the right messaging from behind the scenes this summer, that would encourage him to think, right, well, here we go, can go beyond that. But I don't think there's any great panic. He's not going anyplace. Brendan Rodgers won't be panicking. Celtic won't be panicking. And I feel, as I've said a number of times now, he's had his experience of kind of wanting to sample the Premier League again, see if the grass was greener. He's realised it wasn't. He's realised how happy he was in Glasgow, how emotionally satisfied he was being the Celtic manager. And he's a different guy now in many ways. I think lessons learned. Every day's a school day and all that, even, for guys like us in our 50s. And I think he's perfectly comfortable where he is. He's relaxed in his own skin. And he's just grown into the job more and more. Listen, it might well be, who's to say? Who's to say by the end of next season, maybe he goes, I'm actually exhausted, guys. I've come in, I've done my 3 years, and I now need that break that I was going to have before I came in the first place. There's nothing about Brendan Rodgers' demeanour that suggests to me that that's likely to be the case next summer. And I think if he does get to 5 in a row, of course he's starting to realise that the thing that he left and was criticised so heavily for, this dream scenario of being the guy that leads Celtic to 10, and it's a once-in-a-lifetime scenario that all of a sudden it's come around again. It's twice in a lifetime. And would he walk away from that? Given that he walked away from it the first time, he'd need to be, I think, exhausted emotionally and physically to not want to stay on and give that a crack.
Aye.
I'm not sure, Danny. I think he'll go at the end of next season, if I'm being honest. I just think that's been his whole thing for when he came in. That 3 years, just doing the 3 years.
Is that Brendan on the phone?
Tell me to shut up. No, I just think, listen, it was the right time to come back. He obviously had to heal wounds that were there from before. I think he's now made up fully with the Celtic fans that didn't want him back. As we expected, he's been hugely successful, and as Jacko touched on, there's nothing to indicate that will change next season. No, given how tough it's going to be for Rangers to kind of turn it round in a short space of time. I don't know, if you get to 5 in a row, is Brendan Rodgers really going to stay at Celtic for another 5 years on top of that? I think when you look at his career, I think he'll still young enough to have big ambitions in his career. I think he wants to go back to the Premier League. I think he definitely wants to manage in Europe at some point. Maybe a Spanish club, Portuguese club, something like that, a big club. Brendan Rodgers said himself after Tannadice, the people that are speculating and saying that he wants away, we're just guessing because we don't know him properly, we don't understand him. That might be the case, but my hunch and my gut feeling is that next season will probably be his last. He'll have done his stint and Celtic will be looking for another manager.
Kaiser says in the comment section, I think Brendan Rodgers is looking for a statue in the Celtic way, and Marzuno similarly says, how many people in life get statues? That's what Brendan blew the last time.
Listen, there's in my mind, and I'd say I kind of know Brendan quite well and what makes him tick, and I think that he was genuinely upset at the reaction to him leaving for Leicester the first time round, surprised and upset. And then I think that he realised over the period of being away that why the emotion was so raw, And I think he feels a sense of duty. Now, he does feel a sense of duty. Now, whether Scott's right, but his sense of duty, is limited at a 3-year period, maybe Scott's right. I get the sense with Brendan Rodgers that he feels he made a mistake, and it's not just so much the fact that he left the club, it's the moment in time when, this march towards 10 in a row and history was beckoning. He was pushing it an open door. And I think that probably that opportunity that he walked away from, as I said, should be a once in a lifetime. Incredibly, it might not be. And I think the closer he gets to realising it and being put back in that situation, I think the more emotionally he'll feel inclined to revisit a situation that he knows he shouldn't have really left behind in the first place. So I think that would have to factor in. As I said, unless he was completely physically and emotionally exhausted by it all, but I don't see a guy, when I look at Brendan Rodgers, who looks anywhere near physically or emotionally exhausted. I think he's thoroughly enjoying himself.
Gianni seems to think he's away to West Ham. But Gianni also says, Keith, and he's been on form tonight, I tell you what, he must be typing away at some rate. He also says, tipping PSG the favourites to win the Champions League.
I think you'll find...
Well done, Keith.
I think you'll find when I tipped them to win it, they were nowhere near favourites to win it. Been about 4 rounds ago.
Well, it brings me to my next point. Who's going to win the Europa League?
A big Ange, I've told you that already as well. You can take the double to the bank.
Okay, cheers. Scott?
I think Man United, probably.
Oh,
I think Man United.
Scott, I said to Keith, Man United and Tottenham in a European final. No way Tottenham win that. No way.
Listen, Tottenham will be doing well to get through the second leg against Bodo Glimt.
Good point.
That late goal at the in London in the first leg could be a vital moment. Bodo Glimt's record at home is phenomenal, as we know. Ange has been there before and suffered against Bodo Glimt, certainly. But the record at home is phenomenal. I think that's a tricky second leg for Spurs. I mean, you'd like to think they would score a goal which should see them through, but I don't know. Confidence is pretty fragile. I think that would be tricky for them.
Would you be that shocked as well, Keith, if at half-time at Old Trafford it's 2-0 to Bilbao?
No.
I wouldn't really, particularly.
No, because, the problem with Big Ange's Spurs is that they're so flaky. As I've said previously, from watching them, they don't look, in many of the games that I see, as if they're even carrying out his instructions properly, which suggests some of these players have chucked it. However, you're a professional football player. You're now 90 minutes away from a European final. Might be the one chance you get to play in one of these in your entire career. So even if you're not that fond of what he's telling you to do, or of him as a person, you would think somewhere inside you, you're going to want to try and win that game and get to a final.
Aye.
I think losing James Maddison to injury is a bit of a hammer blow to them because he's such a creative influence.
Tell you what, I hope Spurs do win it, because Big Angie's press conference after it was sensational.
It's just going to be the biggest mic drop in the history of football. We just walk in, mic drop, and then probably middle finger the entire room and walk out the door. See you later, mate. I told you I win something my second season.
Exactly. Aye.
What are we all agreeing that it will be Man United Spurs in the final?
Yes.
No.
I think Spurs will just squeeze through. I think it'll be tight, but Man U Spurs final, I think Man U win it.
Keith?
Yeah. I think Spurs have beaten Man U twice already this season, haven't they?
That makes me think Man U win it even more.
No, not for me. Listen, this Man United side is absolutely woeful. It's woeful. And Spurs, when they're on their game, are a far better side than anything I've seen from Man United
in the Premier
this
League,
season.
which is pretty nuts, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not great. But Manchester United are just about the right place in terms of their level just now. Aye. Spurs are so far below their level. It's frightening.
Do you think Man U will get through, Keith, tonight?
Listen, if they lose an early goal, I think it could become a nervy one. But I'm like Scott. I wouldn't want to put £1 on either of them. But my gut tells me it'll be a Man U Spurs final. And I think that'll be something to look forward to.
Aye,
Especially
absolutely.
as I think Hotline Live might be having a night out that night to celebrate the trophy that you won for us, Daniel.
Listen, I don't want to. Listen, I'm no hero, guys. I'm no hero. If you want to get me a present, that's totally cool.
You seem to have sent me Scott to sleep anyway.
Scott, come back.
Well, hurry up, Daniel.
Scott, you buffering there, son?
He said, actually, just finally from Jan, he says, Marzuno, Mark, Rangers, Easy, OK, Rebel and myself will all beat the Christmas night out this year with our hard efforts. You can come in Europa League final night.
Daniel's pain.
Time will tell, and we'll be back on Sunday to talk after Aberdeen versus Rangers, which should be a cracker as well.
What time on Sunday?
Well, that's a noon kickoff, so are we saying around 3 o'clock again? Does that make sense?
Let's do that, yep.
No, we went 3:30 last week, didn't we?
Half three, that's a better time, yep.
3:30. We'll be back 3:30 on Sunday. We hope you can join us then. Thanks so much for all the comments. Scott, Keith, it's always a pleasure.
Cheers, Daniel. Cheers, wee man.
Cheers, Jack.
And thanks for watching. Cheers.